the high-ceilinged cafeteria of Oakmont. Academy was the kind of place that tried to look like history itself, marble columns that reached up into a skylight, sunlight filtering down like it was auditioning for a museum exhibit. Every table gleamed. Every fork and glass was perfectly placed, and the students who filled the room carried themselves as if they owned not just the school, but the air inside it. Wealth here was not hidden, it was worn like armor, stitched into blazers with custom monograms, hanging off wrists in the form of gold watches and tennis bracelets. Laughter bounced off the marble in polite, controlled bursts. The air smelled faintly of imported coffee and perfume. Jasmine Taylor had learned to move quietly in this place, to make herself small without ever looking like she was trying to disappear. She kept her head down, her lunch tray balanced carefully in her hands as she passed a cluster of tables near the center. Her scholarship blazer was the same navy as everyone else's, but somehow it always looked a shade less expensive, like it knew it hadn't been bought in the same boutique as theirs. It happened in a moment, so quick that, to anyone watching later on video, it would almost look like an accident. Whitney Caldwell, blonde hair glossy, nails painted in pale pink perfection, stood and pivoted in just the right way for her elbow to accidentally knock Jasmine's tray forward. Milk spilled in an arc, spaghetti sliding down like a slow-motion disaster, splattering across Jasmine's blazer, her skirt, and dripping down her legs. The white of her shirt bloomed red with sauce. "Oh," Whitney said, her voice carrying just enough to reach every corner of the room. "I didn't see you there. Guess they'll take anyone these days if it helps the diversity numbers." Her smile was all teeth, the kind of smile that could slice. The clatter of the tray hitting the marble floor was like a gunshot. The room went still. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Forks hovered in the air, and then one by one phones rose. Screens glowed. Someone whispered, "Record this," and a wave of anticipation moved through the crowd. Whitney tilted her head, looking Jasmine over as if she were examining a stain on the furniture. "What's wrong? Can't speak English properly? Or did they just let you in because your kind's good at sports? Certainly wasn't for your brains." The words landed like sharp stones, the kind meant to bruise and linger. Jasmine bent slowly, her fingers trembling as she began gathering her scattered notes, now smeared with milk and sauce. She didn't speak. Her jaw tightened, and deep inside, a familiar voice stirred, a voice she had heard countless times during training sessions at the community center, from a man whose hands were calloused from years of practice. True power is knowing when not to strike. As she reached for the last of her papers, the strap of her worn backpack shifted, and for just a moment, the corner of a folded black belt peeked out, faded, but unmistakable to anyone who knew what it meant. No one here did. To them, she was just the quiet girl from the scholarship list, the one who should have been grateful to be here at all. Whitney's designer shoes stepped forward, crushing one of the papers underfoot, grinding it into the marble. "People like you don't belong here," she whispered, low enough for only Jasmine to hear. "Go back to whatever government housing project you crawled out of." The laughter that followed was sharp and cruel, echoing between the columns. Jasmine straightened, her face unreadable. For a fraction of a second, something flickered in her eyes, a flash of something so controlled, so precise, that Whitney instinctively took half a step back without knowing why. Jasmine said nothing. She adjusted her backpack, turned, and began walking toward the exit. Each step left a faint trail of sauce across the polished floor, a quiet signature that said the moment wasn't over. It had only just begun. **** Jasmine pushed open the heavy oak doors of their apartment building and stepped into the familiar hallway with its peeling cream paint and the faint smell of lemon cleaner. The elevator was broken again, so she climbed the 3 flights to their floor, her shoes leaving faint damp marks, from where the spaghetti sauce had soaked through. By the time she reached apartment 3B, the weight of the day pressed on her shoulders. Like an extra backpack. She turned the key quietly, not wanting to disturb Grandma Ruth if she was napping between shifts. The scent of herbal tea drifted from the kitchen, and a soft humming told Jasmine her grandmother was awake. Ruth emerged from the doorway, still in her pale blue hospital scrubs. Her gray hair pulled into a tight bun, the lines around her eyes deeper than they had been just a year ago. "That you, baby?" she asked, and Jasmine nodded, forcing a smile. She didn't mention Whitney, the tray, or the phones capturing her humiliation. Grandma had enough to worry about without carrying the weight of Oakmont's cruelty on top of it. "How was school?" Ruth asked, her voice warm but tinged with exhaustion. "Fine. Just tired," Jasmine lied, dropping her bag by the couch, the same couch she slept on every night after folding it out into a bed. A living room was cramped, every corner serving a purpose. A bookshelf doubling as a pantry, a narrow table for studying wedged near the window, and a roll-up mat hidden behind the TV stand. That mat was her sanctuary dot after dinner chicken. And rice Ruth had made ahead. Jasmine waited until her grandmother left for the night shift. Then she slid the coffee table against the wall and unrolled the mat her father had given her for her 10th birthday. She placed her bare feet on it, the warm texture grounding her, and closed her eyes. The day's sting, the cold milk dripping. Down her collar, the smell of sauce in her hair, all of it became fuel. Her breath steadied. She moved through the opening sequences of her forms, each stance sharp, every kick snapping like the crack of a whip in the still air. She didn't practice for revenge. She practiced because it was the only place she felt whole. She could hear her father's voice as clearly as if he stood in the room. "Channel it, Jazz. Turn pain into power." She had been training for over a decade, earning her 3rd-degree black belt, not because she wanted to fight, but because it had become the language of her life. Tonight, though, her movements had an extra edge. The thought of Whitney's smirk lit a fire in her chest. Her legs swept through a perfect roundhouse, followed by a spinning hook kick that ended with her body coiled in perfect balance. She landed without sound, the way Master Park had taught her, but when she stopped, sweat running down her back, reality returned like a heavy door slamming shut. The national championship was in 2 months. The registration fee, a glowing $2,000 roadblock she could never climb on her own. That tournament was her ticket to a college scholarship outside Oakmont's suffocating walls, a future where she wouldn't have to measure her worth against the size of someone's trust fund. Her phone buzzed on the couch. She grabbed it, expecting a text from a classmate about homework. Instead, it was worse, a notification from Oakmont's student social feed. Whitney had posted a photo taken during the cafeteria incident. Jasmine kneeling on the floor, sauce dripping down her face, captioned with, "Charity case having a bad day. Maybe she'll go back where she belongs." The comments scrolled endlessly, laughing emojis, cheap jokes, subtle and not so subtle racism. Jasmine stared at the screen until the edges of her vision blurred. She tossed the phone aside and returned to the mat, launching into a set of explosive combinations. Each strike so precise and forceful that the downstairs neighbors would later swear they felt vibrations through their ceiling. When she finally collapsed onto the mat, her breath ragged, she lay there staring at the cracked ceiling, the day replaying itself in loops. She had endured worse. She could endure this. Deep down, something was shifting. Her father's lesson about patience was still carved into her bones, but so was another truth. There would come a time when not striking was no longer strength, it was surrender. And Jasmine Taylor had no intention of surrendering. What she didn't know yet was that the first crack in Oakmont's perfect marble facade was already forming, and when it split open, It would be her name spoken with awe, fear, and respect that echoed through its halls. Asterisk, asterisk. The next afternoon, the sky over Oakmont Academy was the flat gray of polished steel, and the air carried the sharp bite of late winter. Jasmine walked the long path from the science wing toward the gymnasium, her textbooks pressed tight against her chest. She had stayed late to finish a chemistry lab on her own. The group she'd been assigned to had forgotten to tell her they were meeting without her. It didn't matter. She had learned early that Oakmont's group projects were code for do-it-yourself. If you want it done right, as she passed the girls' locker room, a hushed voice snagged her attention. "I can't do it, Allison. I've been practicing for weeks, and I still can't get it right." Jasmine froze, the words echoing down the tiled hallway. It was Whitney, her voice, stripped of its polished cruelty, sounding almost small. "Whit, you're overthinking it," came Allison's reply, irritated and impatient. "The showcase is in 3 weeks. Your parents are expecting you to win. You'll be fine." There was a pause, then Whitney's voice dropped to a frantic whisper. "No, you don't understand. If I mess this up, my dad will lose it. He paid for the choreographer, the lighting, the costumes. And if anyone finds out I copied the routine from that viral video, it's over for me." Jasmine's pulse spiked. She stepped back, pressing herself flat against the cool wall, listening as her mind replayed the words copied the routine. "Whit, nobody's going to find out," Allison said, lowering her voice. "Your parents practically own this school. The judges wouldn't dare give first place to anyone else." Their voices grew fainter as they moved toward the exit, heels clicking against the tile. Jasmine stayed frozen until the sound faded completely, her heart thudding in her ears. The hallway felt different, now like it held a secret that had shifted the entire balance of power. Whitney Caldwell, Oakmont's untouchable queen, was terrified. And her performance, the one the entire school expected to win, was a fraud. Jasmine turned and kept walking, but her mind was no longer on the lab work or the bus ride home. The annual Oakmont Charity Showcase was the crown jewel of the school year, a glittering evening of performances, silent auctions, and wine glasses clinking in the hands of the city's elite. The winner's name would be printed in the program. For decades, and the prize? $2,500. Enough to cover her championship registration and travel. Enough to push open the door she'd been pounding on for years. She had never seriously considered entering. The showcase was for legacy families, the ballet prodigies with custom tutus flown in from Paris, the cellists with instruments worth more than her grandmother's apartment. But now, she could see the cracks in that perfect image. If Whitney's stolen routine was exposed by nothing more than comparison, the judge's untouchable choice might not be so certain. Still, entering meant breaking her carefully maintained invisibility. It meant risking her scholarship. At Oakmont, standing out for the wrong reason could end you. And if the administration, always eager to please donors, thought her entry was an act of defiance, they'd be quick to find an excuse to show her. The door. That night at the community center dojang, Master Park watched her push through drill after drill with an intensity that bordered on reckless. Her strikes were sharper, her stances lower, each movement threaded with something heavier than muscle memory. "You're not fighting the air tonight, Jasmine," he said finally, his voice even but knowing. "Your spirit is troubled." "They're never going to accept me," she said, not looking up. "No matter how perfect my grades are, no matter how polite I am, they've already decided who I am." "Then perhaps," Master Park replied, "it's time to show them who you truly are." She met his gaze, the question already burning. In her chest, "The championship is coming. I'm ready." "But the fee?" "There are always ways for those with determination," he said. "And sometimes the path finds you when you are not looking." By the time she left the dojang, the decision had begun to form, not fully, but like a spark in dry grass. If she could combine her most powerful techniques into a performance, if she could give the judges something they couldn't ignore, she might not just enter the showcase, she might win it. The spark became flame 3 days later when Miss Powell caught her lingering after gym class. The PE teacher, tall and broad-shouldered, bounced a basketball between dribbles as she said, "You move differently than the others. Like you've had training." "Taekwondo," Jasmine admitted. "Third-degree black belt." Miss Powell's eyebrows lifted. "And you let Whitney Caldwell walk all over you?" "It's not about letting her," Jasmine said. "It's about keeping my scholarship." Ms. Powell stopped dribbling, her gaze locking on Jasmine's. "Sometimes survival means keeping your head down. Other times, it means lifting it up so high they can't ignore you." That night, Jasmine sat in the glow of her grandmother's old laptop, the Oakmont Charity Showcase registration page open on the screen. The cursor blinked in the name field, each flash a silent dare. She hesitated only a moment before typing J. Taylor. When she clicked Submit and the confirmation page appeared, she knew there was no turning back. What she didn't know was how far the ripples from that single click were about to spread, or how many people at Oakmont would wish they'd never underestimated her. Asterisk. Asterisk. The alarm on Jasmine's phone buzzed at 4:30 a.m., slicing through the silence of the small apartment like a blade. She lay still for a moment, listening to the soft, uneven breaths coming from Grandma Ruth's bedroom, making sure she hadn't disturbed her. Then, with practiced quiet, she slid from under the blanket. On the pull-out couch, folded it neatly, and padded barefoot to the living room. The mat waited for her in its spot behind the TV stand. Edges curled from years of use. She unrolled it, the fabric whispering against the floor, and knelt in the center. The pre-dawn darkness wrapped around her like a cocoon as she bowed her head, the faint hum of the refrigerator in the background the only sound. Slowly she began deep, deliberate breaths, her muscles waking one at a time. Her hands cut the air in precise arcs, her feet grounded in the stances her father had drilled into her. The forms flowed from one to the next, each kick and strike measured, her mind chasing perfect balance between force and control. The showcase was in 22 days. 22 mornings like this, before she would stand under the stage lights with the wealthiest eyes in the city on her. She would not allow herself to picture failure. It wasn't an option. Not when $2,500 meant a place at the national championship. Not when winning could change the trajectory of her life. At school, the hours stretched and contracted strangely. In classes, the minutes crawled while Whitney's whispers and calculated glances chipped away at her concentration. Between periods, the seconds sprinted past as she hunted for quiet corners to rehearse her routine in her head. Every move mentally choreographed to the music she'd chosen, a mix of traditional Korean drumming and sharp, modern bass. By lunch, the tension in her body was a constant hum. Whitney seemed to sense something in her, circling with renewed cruelty. One afternoon, Jasmine found her locker door pried open and her neatly folded gym uniform crumpled on the floor, a water bottle emptied over it. "Guess silk and sauce don't mix," Whitney said sweetly as she walked by, her friends giggling. That night, at the community dojang, Jasmine attacked the practice dummy with such precision and speed that Master Park eventually stepped in. "You are striking like someone chasing an enemy, not a goal," he warned. "She is both," Jasmine said quietly, sweat slicking her forehead. He studied her for a long moment. "Taekwondo is not about revenge, Jasmine. It is about harmony between mind, body, and spirit. If you let her live in your head, she wins before the match even begins." Her routine evolved under his watchful eye, transforming from a display of raw ability into a story told through movement. She combined her sharpest traditional forms with acrobatic breaks, mid-air spins, board strikes, and combinations that demanded flawless timing. By the end of each night, her muscles burned so fiercely that she would collapse onto the mat, staring at the rafters as if answers might be hidden there. Her schedule was merciless. Practice before dawn, a full day of classes, then rushing home. To care for Grandma Ruth, cooking dinner, checking her medication, folding laundry, before heading to the dojang. After returning, she would practice again until her hands trembled too much to hold a pen for homework. Sleep was a luxury she could not afford. The strain began to show. Dark shadows bloomed under her eyes. Her knuckles were raw from impact training. But each time she looked in the mirror and saw her reflection, feet planted, shoulders back, she could feel the fear thinning, replaced by something steadier. One Friday evening, as she packed up her gear after a punishing session, Miss Powell appeared at the edge of the mat. "So," she said, folding her arms, "this is what you've been hiding." Jasmine froze. "Are you going to tell anyone?" "No, but you look like you're about to fall over." Powell tossed her a bottle of water. "You can't burn yourself down before the fire starts. You need rest as much as you need training." Jasmine almost laughed. Rest wasn't an option, not with Whitney watching her every move, waiting for a slip, and the showcase growing closer by the day. As she walked home under the amber streetlights, her backpack heavy on her shoulders, she thought about what Master Park had said. She wasn't just fighting Whitney. She was fighting the quiet dismissal that had followed her since her first day at Oakmont. The unspoken rule that she was only there on SUFFERANCE. In the apartment, she found Grandma Ruth asleep in her chair, the TV casting flickering light across her lined face. Jasmine covered her with a blanket, then stood for a moment, listening to her steady breathing. 22 days. She could endure anything for 22 days. What she didn't realize was that the closer the showcase came, the less it would be about endurance, and the more it would be about what happened when her strength could no longer stay hidden. The Saturday before the showcase dawned with a brittle, wintry sunlight that slid between the blinds and cut across Jasmine's face, waking her earlier than usual. She stretched on the couch, every muscle tight from weeks of training. The air in the apartment was still, almost too quiet. She pushed herself up, the sound of the springs groaning under her weight, and padded toward the kitchen. Grandma Ruth sat at the table in her robe, a thin stack of envelopes spread out in front of her. The light from the window picked out the silver in her hair, but her expression was shadowed. Jasmine froze. She had seen that look before after her father's funeral, after the hospital bills came, after every time life had dropped another weight on them. "What's wrong?" Jasmine asked, sliding into the chair across from her. "Nothing you need to worry about," Ruth said quickly, shuffling the envelopes into a neat pile. But she moved too fast, and one slipped out, landing face up on the table. A red, passed dude stamp glared from the corner. Jasmine pulled the paper closer before Ruth could snatch it back. It was from the hospital, the charges from Ruth's bout with pneumonia last month. Insurance had covered some of it, but not all. The balance, $1,800, might as well have been $1 million. "I can pick up extra shifts," Ruth said, her voice tight. "We'll make it work." "You can't," Jasmine replied softly. "You're still recovering. If you push yourself, you'll end up back in the hospital." For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Jasmine thought about the $2,500 prize money for the showcase, how she had been thinking only of the championship fee. Now the number had a different weight. $2,000 for the registration, $1,800 for the bills. No matter how she sliced it, something would go unpaid. She wanted to tell her grandmother that she'd find another way, that she'd take on work somewhere, anything, to avoid putting their hopes on one risky performance. But then she thought about the championship. She thought about college. She thought about a life where Ruth didn't have to carry the weight of their survival alone. That evening, Jasmine stayed late at the dojang, working through the full routine again and again, until her breath came in ragged bursts and her GI was damp with sweat. The wood floor was warm under her bare feet from the heat of her own movement. Master Park watched quietly from the corner, arms folded, until she finished the last sequence, an aerial combination ending in a break-in strike. That sent the board snapping in two. "You have created something powerful," he said finally. "For the judges?" She asked, catching her breath. He shook his head. "For yourself. Remember, when you stand on that stage, it is not for them. It is for your father, for the girl you were when you started, for the woman you will be after." His words settled into her like an anchor. When she got home, Ruth was waiting up, a steaming mug of tea on the table. "You're still doing this?" she asked, searching Jasmine's face. "Yes," Jasmine said simply, "and I'm going to win." Sunday passed in a blur of preparation. Jasmine double-checked her uniform, folding it with the same precision. She brought to her forms. She polished her belt, the black faded from years of wear. She wrapped her father's gold chain carefully, tucking it into the pocket of her backpack. On Monday, the change in the air at Oakmont was almost physical. The showcase buzz had reached fever pitch. Posters hung in the hallways, and students swapped predictions in the cafeteria. Whitney was in full performance mode, floating from group to group in a swirl of glittering costume fabric. Her confidence turned up to 11. But Jasmine noticed something else, an edge to Whitney's voice. When she talked about her routine, a flicker of tension around her eyes. That locker room confession was still hanging in the back of Jasmine's mind at lunch. Jasmine kept to herself, headphones in, eyes on her notes. But as she rose to leave, a sharp shoulder hit hers, sending her bag slipping to the floor. Whitney's. Friend Allison bent to pick it up, her manicured nails brushing the fabric of Jasmine's uniform inside. "What's this?" she asked with mock sweetness. "Nothing that concerns you," Jasmine said, taking it back. Allison smirked. "Guess. We'll find out soon enough." That night, Jasmine lay awake on the couch long after Ruth had gone to bed. The ceiling above her was a blank, pale expanse, but her mind was full of the roar of an imaginary crowd, of the sharp crack of boards breaking, of the sound of her father's voice saying, "Show them who you are." She could feel it now. The day she had been preparing for wasn't just coming. It was here, pressing against the edges of her life, demanding to be met head-on. And when it arrived, there would be no hiding left. The night of the Oakmont Charity Showcase arrived like a scene out of a movie Jasmine had never been invited to star in. The Performing Arts Center gleamed under spotlights, its glass facade glowing against the cold evening. Luxury cars slid up the circular drive, their doors opening to spill out donors in long coats and gowns, parents with practiced smiles, and the kind of confidence that came from knowing their names were etched on the school's walls. Inside, the lobby hummed with champagne chatter, the air scented faintly with roses from elaborate centerpieces. Students darted between dressing rooms and backstage corridors, each costume more elaborate than the last sequin dresses, tuxedos, silk ballet skirts imported from Paris. Jasmine moved quietly through the chaos, keeping to the shadows. Her backpack clutched against her chest, like it carried her entire future. In a way, it did. She found an empty dressing room and closed the door behind her, the noise outside dimming to a muffled roar. Her hands were steady as she unzipped the bag, revealing the white dobok she had pressed the night before, the black belt folded with military precision. She slipped into the uniform, the familiar weight settling over her shoulders like armor. From the bottom of the bag, she took her father's gold chain, looping it twice around her wrist and tying it securely. It caught the overhead light for a moment, flashing like a promise. A sharp knock broke her focus. 10 minutes to curtain, a voice called. All performers to the green room. When she walked in, conversation faltered. Heads turned. The silk and sequins in the room made her plain white uniform look almost jarring. Whitney stood in the center, her dance costume a swirl of glittering fabric, every detail screaming money and professional polish. Her eyes widened when she saw Jasmine, the realization dawning like a slow burn. "You're Jay Taylor," Whitney said, her voice low but sharp. "You entered the showcase?" Jasmine met her gaze without flinching. "Guess we'll both find out what the judges think." Whitney's lips curved into a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "My parents are the main sponsors. The judges know what's expected." The stage manager called the first act, and the showcase began. From the wings, Jasmine watched a senior perform a flawless piano sonata, followed by a pair of ballet dancers, whose costumes sparkled under the lights. Applause was polite, measured. Each performance was technically perfect, but carried the same practiced china, kind of polish that kept the audience appreciating, but never feeling. Then Whitney's turn came. She floated onto the stage in a wash of blue light, her every movement precise. The choreography was seamless, beautiful even, but Jasmine could see the viral video's fingerprints on every step. The audience clapped enthusiastically, her parents leading the charge from the front row, but there was no electricity in the air. Act after act followed, the applause rising and falling in predictable waves. And then the announcer's voice boomed. "Performing a martial arts demonstration, please welcome Jay Taylor." The murmur started immediately, curiosity rippling through the crowd. From the wings, Jasmine stepped into the light. The stage felt enormous under her bare feet, the heat from the spotlights prickling her skin. She bowed deeply, not to the audience, but to her father, to the years of training, to herself. The first beats of her chosen music rolled through the auditorium, deep Korean drums layered over a pulsing bass. She moved into her opening forms, each strike clean and deliberate, her stance unshakable. The audience, uncertain at first, grew still. She transitioned into more dynamic movements, spinning hook kicks that sliced the air, her belt snapping. With each turn, two assistants from Master Park's dojang stepped forward, holding boards high. Jasmine's foot shattered the first with a sharp crack that echoed off the walls. Then the second, and the third in rapid succession. Momentum built. She leapt into aerial combinations, her body a blur of white and black, the chain on her wrist catching the light with every motion. She wasn't just performing. She was telling them a story of walking into rooms where she wasn't wanted, of hearing the laughter and swallowing the hurt, of holding her strength like a secret weapon until the moment came to unleash it. 4. The finale, she signaled to 3 tall volunteers from the basketball team. They formed a line, arms outstretched at shoulder height. From 15 feet back, Jasmine sprinted forward, vaulted into a flying kick, and soared clean over them, landing in perfect silence on the other side. The auditorium gasped as one, the sound followed by a thunderous wave of applause. Someone stood, then another, until the entire room was on its feet. The roar of the ovation hit her like a physical force. In the wings, Whitney stared, her expression frozen. Jasmine bowed once more, the chain on her wrist glinting under the lights, then walked off stage with her head high, heart pounding not from exhaustion, but from the knowledge that she had just turned the entire balance of Oakmont's world upside down, and she had done it without ever raising a fist in anger. *** Backstage was a different kind of chaos, now no longer the pre-show hum of nerves and whispered cues, but a charged current of voices, footsteps, and clattering props. Jasmine slipped through it all, clutching her uniform's edges as if to anchor herself in the moment. She'd expected polite applause at best, maybe a few. Nods of approval from those who respected skill when they saw it. She had not expected this standing ovation, people craning in their seats to keep her in view, parents with deep pockets actually leaning forward like they were seeing something that mattered. The stage manager rushed past, headset askew, muttering into his mic, "Yes, we're running long, just tell the next act to cut 30 seconds. And yet he looked at Jasmine as he passed, gave her a thumbs up, and grinned like she'd just pulled off a miracle. She ducked into the dressing room to change out of her bilbuck before the award announcements. Her hands trembled not from fear, but from the strange lightness settling over her chest. She had shown them. Whether she won or not, they had seen. The door swung open with a force that rattled the hinges. Whitney stood in the frame, her glittering costume catching the harsh fluorescent light, her face a careful mask that barely hid the fury beneath. She shut the door behind her with a sharp click. "You planned this," she said, her voice low but vibrating with heat. "You wanted to humiliate me in front of everyone." Jasmine folded her bilbuck slowly, deliberately, keeping her eyes on the fabric. "I entered a competition and performed to the best of my ability, just like you did." Whitney's laugh was humorless, a brittle sound. "Don't pretend this was fair. My parents sponsored the showcase. I was supposed to win. And now," she took a step forward, "my father can make one call and your precious scholarship disappears." The old fear tried to rise in Jasmine's chest, but it couldn't find a foothold. She met Whitney's gaze evenly, then shifted her stance, barely noticeable, unless you knew what to look for. When Whitney shoved her, Jasmine stepped aside, in a fluid redirection, letting the force carry Whitney half a step forward without ever striking back. It was as effortless as breathing. "Don't touch me again," Jasmine said, her voice calm but carrying an edge sharp enough to cut. Neither girl realized the door hadn't closed all the way. Just outside, 3 students, 2 from the basketball team and a junior from the yearbook committee, had been filming on their phones, expecting post-show drama. Instead, they'd captured Whitney's threat in crystal clarity, followed by Jasmine's unshakable control. Within minutes, the video began making its way through the crowd in the lobby. Whispered comments turned into murmurs, murmurs into conversations. By the time the final act finished and the judges took the stage, the clip had been sent, reposted, and commented on dozens of times. A quiet storm gathering under Oakmont's glittering surface. The head judge cleared his throat into the microphone. "Third place," he announced, "goes to Michael Chun for his violin concerto." Applause, polite. "Second place to Whitney Caldwell for her contemporary dance." There was a ripple through the audience, a mixture of surprise and discomfort. Whitney's smile was tight, her parents' applause mechanical. "And first place," the judge said, a faint smile breaking across his face, "with the $2,500 prize, goes to Jasmine Taylor for her extraordinary taekwondo demonstration." The applause was instant and overwhelming. Students whistled, parents clapped, hard enough to echo against the walls, and a few even stood again. Jasmine walked to the stage in a steady, measured stride, accepted the envelope and the trophy, and bowed not just to the judges, but to the entire room. When she stepped back into the wings, Ms. Powell was there, her eyes bright. "You didn't just win," she said quietly. "You changed the conversation." Jasmine didn't fully understand yet how true that was. The video of Whitney's threat was already spreading beyond Oakmont's walls, reaching alumni groups, even a few local reporters' inboxes. By morning, it wouldn't just be her martial arts that people were talking about, it would be the way she'd stood her ground, unshaken in the face of someone the school had always treated as untouchable. And for the first time since stepping into Oakmont's marble halls, Jasmine knew the balance of power had shifted, and it wasn't going back. The next morning, Sunlight poured through Oakmont Academy's front gates, making the manicured lawns glitter like they'd been dusted with glass. But the air on campus carried something Jasmine had never felt before. Eyes turning toward her, not in dismissal, but in acknowledgement. Some students nodded as she passed. Others whispered, not with the sneer she was used to, but with something closer to curiosity, even respect. And she knew why. The video of Whitney's backstage threat, paired with Jasmine's calm, almost surgical deflection, had gone through the school like wildfire overnight. By breakfast, it had reached alumni chat groups. By mid-morning, it was trending in the local community forum under the headline, Oakmont's Golden Girl Caught on Camera Bullying. Scholarship student gets upstaged in charity showcase. A notification in her inbox reminded her of why she was here early. Scholarship mid-year review, headmaster's office. YY.M.Ms. Powell was waiting just outside the office, leaning against the wall with her arms crossed, a faint smile on her lips. I made sure Williams saw that video before you walked in, she said. Why? Jasmine asked. Because truth works better when it's harder to ignore. Before Jasmine could respond, the door opened and Headmaster Williams stepped aside to let her in. Ms. Bennett, the guidance counselor who'd once told her to fit in, sat stiffly in one of the leather chairs, her expression pinched. Taylor, Williams began, folding his hands on the desk. This review was scheduled as a routine matter, but recent events have shifted the context. Jasmine sat straight, her hands resting loosely in her lap. Your academic record is impeccable, he continued. Top grades, glowing teacher reports. That has never been in question. He removed his glasses, placing them on the desk. However, concerns were raised regarding your cultural fit here at Oakmont. His eyes flicked briefly toward Ms. Bennett, who didn't meet Jasmine's gaze. After viewing your performance last night, and the footage that has since circulated, it is clear those concerns were unfounded. Your conduct demonstrated exceptional discipline, skill, and composure under pressure. Qualities we value highly. Jasmine felt the tension in her spine loosen, but she kept her expression neutral. Your scholarship will continue. In full, Williams said firmly. Additionally, the board has requested a review of our harassment policies. Ms. Bennett will be leading that initiative. If Ms. Bennett's smile was any tighter, it would have cracked. Thank you, Jasmine said simply, rising to her feet. She bowed her head slightly, not as a show of deference, but because she knew leaving with her dignity intact was its own kind of victory. Outside the office, a small knot of students waited Trevor from the lacrosse team, a girl from her chemistry class, and 2 juniors she'd never spoken to before. That was incredible last night, Trevor said. We were wondering, would you maybe teach us some basics? Like a martial arts club? It took her a second to process it. You want me to teach you taekwondo? Why not? The chemistry girl said. You're obviously the best at it. That afternoon, Jasmine received an email from administration, approving the formation of an official Oakmont Martial Arts Club, with Ms. Powell as faculty sponsor and Jasmine as student leader. The following week, she used the prize money to register for the national championship and cover part of Ruth's hospital bill. The rest they would handle together. When summer came, she placed 3rd at nationals, a bronze medal, yes, but it came with a partial athletic scholarship to add to her academic one. On the first club meeting in the fall, Jasmine stood barefoot. On the gym floor, 20 students lined up before her in borrowed uniforms, some still in jeans because they hadn't gotten one yet. She looked at their faces, some shy, some eager, and saw younger versions of herself, ready to learn what she already knew deep down. Taekwondo isn't about fighting, she told them. It's about knowing your own strength, even when others can't see it yet, especially then. Across the gym, Ms. Powell leaned against the wall, watching with the same expression Master Park wore when he knew she was about to take another step forward. In the weeks that followed, the ripple effects of that one night continued to spread. Oakmont's new harassment policy was rolled out with mandatory training sessions for faculty and students. Whitney returned to school quieter, her parents' influence no longer enough to erase the shift in social gravity. She kept her distance from Jasmine. At once, in the library, she paused beside her table and muttered, "I'm sorry." It wasn't much, but it was more than Jasmine had ever expected. One crisp October afternoon, Jasmine found herself back at the community dojang, kneeling to help a shy 7-year-old girl with her first white belt form. The girl's mother stood near the door, watching anxiously, explaining she couldn't afford regular lessons. Jasmine didn't hesitate. She had already set aside a portion of her showcase winnings for kids like this. "Don't worry," Jasmine said. "She's got a spot." As the girl bowed to begin again, Jasmine felt something settle deep in her chest, a quiet knowing. She had come to Oakmont to survive, but she was leaving a mark that would last long after she was gone. Some walls weren't meant to be accepted. They were meant to be transformed not by force, but by the unshakable courage to stand in the light, over and over, until the world had no choice but to see you.